So when DeSoto left Parkin on or about July 5th of 1541, we don't know a lot that happened in the area after that, but archaeological evidence shows that by 1550, the site was abandoned. There are no mass graves. We don't find those in Arkansas. East of here, people will say, oh, smallpox got everyone. Not the case here. When plagues and smallpox and things happen, then you'll find a grave full of dozens of people, because the people that survived had no choice but to just bury people as quickly as they could to try to stave off disease. No evidence of any smallpox or mass graves in Arkansas anywhere. They just left. What we think is most likely is that Pakaha, who had many, many more warriors, after all of the problems that had happened during the DeSoto visit, just decimated them. And just like the United States did to Japan after World War II, or Germany, after you've beat someone that badly that's caused a lot of trouble, you make them disarm. And so at Parkin, what we find is that they pulled up their palisade wall and put it down. We do find that burials happened there for a generation or more afterwards, but no evidence at all that people still lived there. So they left. The French came through in the 15s, in the 16s. They found sparse settlements here and there. They didn't find any evidence of, large scale population like there was at the time of DeSoto. And a few little settlements were here and there. And then it wasn't really until about the early 1900s that eastern Arkansas started to really be settled. A couple reasons for that. Those rivers that have been so good to us as far as making some of the most, if not the most fertile farmland in the world, hosting just crazy amounts of different wildlife and things that made living here good, also could make living here pretty hostile. It was a swampy, nasty mess. Quite 400 years after DeSoto visited Parkin, another group of investors came there looking for natural resources as well. The Northern Ohio Mill and Cooperage relocated from Northern Ohio. Anyway, they had cut down all of the trees in Northern Ohio because that's what lumber mills. Let me rewind. They had cut down all of the trees in Northern Ohio because that's what lumber mills do. And, you're kind of out of work once you do that. So they had to go looking for acreage elsewhere and ended up buying a pretty large tract of land right there at Parkin. When they show up here, sight unseen, to come get all of the awesome hardwoods that we had to offer, they see all these Indian mounds. They don't really know what the deal is with them, but they're informed that, these are Indian mounds, and they're workers that they brought down from Ohio, because Ohio does also belong to that same Mississippian culture. They were familiar with the concept, and they also were kind of superstitious, where they didn't want to dig in the mounds. They didn't want to destroy the mounds. They just wanted to kind of act like they weren't there and kind of protect them in that they were going to ignore them. So it's a great blessing to us that the largely African-American workforce of the Northern Ohio Mill had that kind of attitude toward the culture from, again, almost 400 years before them, because if they had been otherwise minded, we wouldn't have these mounds and artifacts to see today. So they set up a mill, a very, very active mill all around the site. Actually built their homes just right up to the mound. They had a road kind of going over the very base of it. And one of the little ladies that was born and raised there was a lady named Miss Rosie Patterson. Her dad worked for the mill. Her mother taught school. She grew up in a little bitty house there on the site. And as a child, she started seeing things that really concerned her. She would tell her mother and others that were close to her that she would see a man in her bedroom. Well, this freaked her daddy out, and he would check around and, get very protective. And of course, there was no one in the house, and he would ask her to describe this person. And she would always describe kind of a 18 to 20-year-old Native American man. There weren't any of those kinds of guys living in Parkin, so it was kind of confusing to him, and she kept on saying it. Not every night, but pretty regularly. And then before too long, she told some girlfriends at church. And well, it got out. The whole town said, Rosie thinks she sees ghosts. She's kind of... And, they knew she was a good girl. They grew up with her. Her parents were good people. They didn't say really bad things about her. It was more of an ongoing kind of joke that Miss Rosie thought she saw ghosts, but, it's Rosie. What are you going to do? Well, she lived in that house that, she was raised in up until the 1990s when the state of Arkansas acquired the mound and the surrounding village and were going to turn it into a state park. They decided it was really hard to talk to kids about Indians and mounds and things like this while they're looking at carports with little old men working on their lawnmowers. So the state of Arkansas started moving these homes off the site one by one and or buying the people a new home in town. Miss Rosie was the last holdout. She didn't want to leave her home because that was where her parents had raised her. It was sentimental to her. And she told them, she said, you can move my existing house, but I don't want you to tear it down and to build me another one. I want my home. And they said, okay. So the very last home to be moved there at Parkin off the site was Miss Rosie's. The excavation equipment came in. And what we know from Arkansas earlier excavations and archaeologists that have been through is we don't have burial mounds per se in Arkansas like you've heard the term. Those are mostly east of us. Here in Arkansas, what we find is that people aren't buried in the mound unless they lived on top of it like the chief. People were buried under their house floors where they lived all out in the village. And again, I think I told you that Miss Rosie's house was built on top of the old Indian village. So when they went under her house to pick it up, they scraped under about 6 to 8 inches of dirt, no lower than that, because we never want to disturb any kind of burial. We always want to keep from doing that if at all possible. But when they did, and they lifted her house up, right under her bed, not 6 to 8 inches deep, was buried a warrior. 18 to 20-year-old warrior brave. He didn't have any kind of skeletal malformation, so we don't believe that he died in war. We believe it was a disease issue, that he just got sick, got a fever or something, and died. No evidence that his skeleton was hurt by warfare, but he was right under her bed. We know he's a warrior because he was buried with the most exclusive and elusive of all of the southeastern Mississippian culture artifacts, the head pot, which are only found in northeast Arkansas, southeast Missouri, and the extreme western side of Kentucky. A few over 100 ever found, and it was found there right under her bed. So we know that this gentleman was very important. Most likely was the chief's son or maybe a nephew that was in line to be a chief. Miss Rosie, who was watching the whole thing with interest because she didn't want them messing up her house, when she saw the skeleton right under her bed, she said, "I've been telling y'all for years. I've been saying it, and nobody believed me." Well, everyone believes her now. They moved her house to town, and for the rest of Miss Rosie's life, she said she never ever saw that gentleman again. She also said she really didn't blame him because, after all, she was suffocating him all those years.